The topic of this webinar, the title is called Application Rationalization, but the rationalization is simply the process that we use in order to evaluate the benefits of applications and to determine which ones we keep and which ones we retire. And for many of you, your IT organizations will implement new applications, but how many of you actually retire the older applications? What we found in consulting with many large customers is that they wind up with both the old applications and the new applications running in parallel. And part of that is that there really is no process for retiring applications and no ownership for retiring applications. So what I'd like to do today is to discuss an application rationalization process that helps you identify obsolete applications and also develop a strategy, and sometimes the strategy may not include retirement. Susan, I don't know if you turned control over to me to page down on the presentation.
Okay,
My
yes,
apologies.
You should be, oh, that's okay. You should be able to move the slides on the bottom left-hand corner with a blue arrow.
Okay, there it is.
It's okay? All right, good.
Let's talk a little bit about the problem. First of all, I'm dropping the phone here. First of all, many organizations don't have a formal application portfolio management initiative. And what we mean by that is application portfolio management should manage applications throughout the entire life cycle. There's a lot of attention given to the initial development or implementation of an application. There's less attention given to the day-to-day support and operations of applications, and almost no attention given to the end-of-life or retirement of applications. Another major problem is that the application inventories themselves, in a large organization, they can have hundreds and hundreds of applications, yet there's no central inventory or logging of those applications. There's no ownership from a business perspective of the applications that is clearly defined, especially with shared applications. Very often, there is no visibility of the cost of the applications or the risks. There are numerous redundant applications because of mergers, or older applications are not retired when new ones are implemented. Organizations continue to operate older applications written with obsolete technologies, and applications support knowledge and technology experience are provided by older professionals who will be retiring. So you can see within this slide that there's a substantial number of risks there. And as we look at the where the work is, more than 50% of the IT budget in many organizations is actually spent on operating and supporting applications. So this is not a trivial amount of money, and if the applications we're supporting are either obsolete or should have been retired or contain risks, then it is incumbent upon us to do something about it. Well, what does the industry say about the opportunity? Well, if you look at Forrester, Forrester says that application operation and maintenance costs consume 65% of the average IT budget. So we give a lot of attention to which projects we're going to implement, and yet we're ignoring 65% of the budget. And then even Gartner comes in and says that an IT organization can actually achieve 20% cost savings in the first year if they simply rationalize the applications and decide which ones are providing value and which ones are not. So if we do rationalize the applications, well, what are some of the options that we have? We have this existing inventory of applications. Well, we could replace them. We could re-engineer or re-platform them. We could keep them as is and perhaps outsource support so that it doesn't consume our internal knowledge workers. We could do nothing, simply continue to operate them the way they are. Or finally, we could retire the application. The question is, though, how do we know which of these options is the best option? Well, the first step in this process is what we refer to as rationalizing the applications. The word rationalize means to justify the benefits and continued existence of an application. Now, that may seem like it's pretty obvious, But the fact of the matter is that once an application is implemented in production, its existence was justified at the very beginning when it was created or implemented. But very few organizations go back and repeat that justification effort. We've found applications that have been running in production for several years, and there's really no business community out there that's actively using them because nobody went out and asked if anybody cared if the application still existed. Another part of the rationalization process should be to look at the capabilities of the current applications and the business needs and identify the gaps. So I may have an existing portfolio of applications, but how closely do they align with what the business needs? And perhaps, some of the applications where there's a big gap, we should replace them or get rid of them or put something else in. What are the operations and support costs of the applications? And are there any performance or reliability issues or other risks? So if a critical business application is currently being operated by an organization that has high support costs, is unreliable, it has to be changed and fixed quite often, that poses a risk to the business because the business is now dependent on an unreliable and unsupportable application. What value is provided by the application? Business needs change. The value that the application provided 5 years ago when it was implemented may not be the same and may not actually be a value today. There are also, as I said, we implement new applications all the time, and in many cases there are overlaps in capability. So it is not unusual to find redundancies where there are multiple applications that provide a similar capability. And some are higher cost, some are lower cost. Which ones provide better business value? This is what the rationalization process also must answer. And then finally, if the cost of the application and the risks and the capabilities don't translate into value for the business, then we'll really only have one of two options: either enhance the application to improve its value and address the risks, or simply get rid of it. Well, how do we choose which applications we want to retire? Well, first of all, we should ask ourselves the following questions. If the replacement application is in production and it causes a duplication of capabilities, in other words, my new application is providing similar capabilities as the old application, then why do I continue to keep the old application? The old application may be obsolete with few, if any, users at all. There may not be a replacement application, but nobody continues to use the old one. There may be obsolete technology involved. So if I'm supporting an application that is dependent on technology that's no longer supported by a vendor, we should seriously consider doing something about that, because I may not be able to find people to support it because it's obsolete technology, number one, and I can't get any vendor support for it. So it poses a very big risk to the organization. And then finally, this kind of repeats what I said before, if the application has reliability issues and has a high level of complexity and a high support cost and operations cost, that is another application to consider replacing and retiring. What are some of the benefits that we would get from actually retiring applications? Well, first of all, it reduces the overall supported operations costs. If you recall earlier, I said the operations support cost for applications is more than 50% of the budget. It also reduces the duplication of data and functionality, which at first it seems like, well, that shouldn't be that big a deal, but when you have redundant data and functionality, what happens is that somebody in the business community winds up having to reconcile the two different sources of data in order to make sure that there are no issues. We could also eliminate the risk from operating obsolete technology, and we also eliminate the risk of finding and retaining staff with obsolete technical skills. I mean, if the people